Hello everyone, and welcome to Biopedia. The Anthropocene, which is Latin for age of man, is a term which is gaining popularity, what with the impact our species is having on our planet. But what exactly is it? Well, the term was first used by Eugene Stürmer in the late 1980s. However, it didn't gain traction until the Dutch Nobel laureate in chemistry, Paul Crutzen, used it at a conference in 2000 and in a newsletter the same year. What this term refers to is the time during which humanity has had a noticeable impact on the Earth's systems, as well as its oceans, surface, and atmosphere. This time interval is not official, but some scientists argue that it should be instated to follow on from the Holocene Epoch, the current accepted geological era which began with the end of the Weichselian glaciation 11,700 years ago. Incidentally, for further details, see episode 8, where these geological terms are explained in a bit more detail. So, what would these anthropogenic impacts be? To give just one example, the pH of the oceans has dropped by 0.1 from 1750 to 2010. This 30% rise in acidity, as well as projected future acidification of the oceans, might possibly slow down or stop coral reef production around the world. As another example, carbon dioxide levels have risen from 316 parts per million by volume in 1959 to 390 parts per million 50 years later. Our impact on the planet has reached global proportions, and we're having big impacts on chemical processes and the composition of the atmosphere. Hence the term Anthropocene, marking the point at which humanity's impact on various parts of the Earth started to be tangible from a planetary perspective. However, the term does face some criticism for its implication that humanity as a whole is responsible for all the damage we've unleashed on the environment so far. The vast majority of emissions throughout history, after all, have been from the modern-day developed nations. It could also be argued that some developing nations are only now starting to make a serious contribution to fossil fuel emissions, meaning that the idea that all emissions and consequences from the beginning of this period up until now are their fault seems unfair. For context, the beginning of the Industrial Revolution in Britain has been placed as far back as the 18th century. That means that, in terms of time, nations like Britain have had a big head start on countries such as China, which only really started industrializing in force between the 1960s and 1990s. Hence the criticism. The Anthropocene has been recommended nonetheless for official geological epoch status in the 35th International Geological Congress in 2016. If it is adopted by the International Union of Geologic Sciences and by the International Commission on Stratigraphy, it will become an official chapter in our planet's geological story. However, the next problem then comes with marking the start of this shiny new epoch. When exactly do we say the Anthropocene began? It could have begun 14,000 years ago with the extinction of the mammoth, but this date is controversial given that some maintain there isn't evidence for human-caused extinction. Alternative dates place the beginning of agriculture, the dropping of the atom bomb in 1945, or other dates as the start of the Anthropocene, to give just two examples. Crutzen himself believed that 1784, the year when James Watt is said to have invented his steam engine, should mark the date. The Anthropocene Working Group, by contrast, in 2016 recommended that 1950 should mark its beginning, as by then plutonium isotopes from the test of nuclear weapons would have built up enough to be detectable in future rock layers of our era. As you can see, this question isn't settled yet. The Anthropocene as a concept is not yet specifically defined given its unofficial nature and the fact that we're still hammering out the details. However, it definitely serves as a useful reminder that humans are powerful creatures. After all, the signatures of our existence will now show up in future rock layers. It's also a reminder that we should use that power responsibly. As always, thank you all for listening. We can be contacted at biopediapodcast@gmail.com for any questions, comments, or topic suggestions for future episodes. Until next time, have a great week, everyone.